This is Prosper Sustainably's ETEP training video on an overview of an ETEP Strategic Work Plan version 1. An ETEP Strategic Work Plan is a Tribal Environmental Plan, or TEP. An ETEP Strategic Work Plan, or TEP, is a major component of an EPA-Tribal Environmental Plan. However, keep in mind that a full ETEP will include other components which can be further explained by your GAP grant project officer. During this training, I will cover an overview of an ETEP strategic work plan, including the various components and elements of a strategic work plan, an ETEP strategic work plan designed by Prosper Sustainably. So here in front of you, you see an ETEP strategic work plan developed in Excel format. An Excel format is Prosper Sustainably's preferred template or format for developing an ETEP strategic work plan, or TEP, because of its functionality. You'll see 4 tabs down at the bottom for the spreadsheet. I'm going to go over each. So starting here on the overview tab, this tab just has some basic information about what this particular worksheet spreadsheet contains. It talks about the purpose of the ETEP strategic work plan and how it is a TEP. This right here just shows the priority program areas that are covered within the TEP. And then the section below that just goes into some detail on how this meets the EPA gap guidance requirements for particular elements. And so this particular portion of it is meeting the requirements of component 1 of an ETEP from EPA's 2013 gap guidance document. So component 1 being the tribal programs and priorities, which is also can be referred to as the Tribal Environmental Plan, or TEP. This tab right here is the main body of the plan. This essentially is the plan itself. This particular spreadsheet contains 4 tables. The first table is a description of the priority program areas, and this is this orange table right here. This right here is just a short name version of the priority program area. Each one's a bit longer. So in this case, the air is actually air resources. And so this tab allows you to see which area it is, and this particular column provides the description of that priority program area. And there's one, there's one row for each. The table below that includes the long-term program area goals per priority program area, and this may include one or more long-term program area goals for each priority program area. This spreadsheet is only an example, so in most cases there'll be multiple, anywhere from 2 to 5 goals, or even more perhaps, for each program area. And but in this case, I just provide a few as an example. So you have the area right here on the left side in column A, and then the actual description, or the goal itself, written out in column B. This third table is the most detailed and most important portion of the ETEP. It is the table of all the objectives, and I'm going to come back to this in a moment and show how they're organized and what else this table includes. At the very bottom of the sheet, the last table is the plans to manage authorized EPA programs, and this is the tribe's plans to manage statutory environmental programs such as programs under the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. This could be TAS, this could be delegation, and so these are organized by program area as well, with each one is listed, and then this describes what exactly the plans are, and in most instances, if there are plans, they're embedded within the objectives. So where that is the case, it says C objectives or milestones. In some areas, there is no current opportunity for the tribe to manage the federal statutory program, or there just is no federal statutory program such as education outreach, and some such as waste management. You may also see that there are no plans at this time to pursue that. So again, these are just examples. So scrolling back up to the objectives. So this is the objectives / intermediate program development milestones. These flow down from the overarching goal. So an overarching long-term priority program area goal is going to be broader, it's going to be longer term, and it may not actually be achievable within a given time period. But something that still the tribe wants to pursue. And these are excuse me, the objectives and essentially sub-goals or steps that the tribe is going to take to fulfill those objectives. And so the first column here is actually an indication of the year in which this particular objective is going to be executed, and this can be either a calendar year or a fiscal year. In most cases, tribes are aligning this with their federal fiscal year. The second column is the actual description of the objective itself. The third column, CI numbers, stands for capacity indicator numbers. These, if the objective itself is associated with a capacity indicator number taken from the 2013 GAP guidance, then it is listed here. So this is Appendix 1 of the 2013 GAP guidance, and this is the guidebook for building tribal environmental program capacity, and it lists a series of indicators and provides a number for each one. So these numbers can be found if there are objectives within the ETEP. Any capacity indicators that particular objective could be associated with are included in here, and in most cases I'm a bit broader in my interpretation, so that I would err on the side of including more indicators rather than being very prescriptive and including as few indicators as possible. So those are provided here. In some instances, it'll say not applicable or NA. The role right here identifies whose responsibility. So column D is whose responsibility is meeting that particular objective. And when the tribe is drafting their ETEP Strategic Work Plan, 99% of these are going to be the tribe's responsibility. In some cases, it may be the tribe and the EPA's responsibility, such as annually reviewing and updating an ETEP. But there are some limited circumstances, or if the EPA allows it, that there could be objectives that are specific, that are just the EPA's role. One example is providing an end-of-year review report, or preparing one of those for a GAP end-of-year progress report. So the EPA is required to do those, and that could be inserted into this plan as the EPA's responsibility. The next column, E, is the particular area, and this aligns with this is the priority program area, and this is just the shorthand version of it. It is important that, especially with these sortable columns, that these have the same spelling, the exact same spelling, the exact same name, so that they can be filtered properly. That will be covered in a separate training video. Column F is a category, and these are categories that I've kind of grouped things into that just make it a little easier to kind of sort and filter things. These aren't the only way that some of these things could be described, or the category. They're not any kind of official category for these, and they're not something that's required by the EPA. I just found that they're useful when I'm trying to focus on a particular area or a particular type of activity. Column G is whether the activity itself is a repeat activity or not. So in some instances, such as, let's see, row 38 that I'm on right now, annually reviewing and updating in ETEP, climate change, priority program area goals and objectives, obtaining input from relevant department leaders and other stakeholders. This is an objective that should be done annually. And so in this ETEP, you will find this same exact language for under the climate change priority program area for 4 years in a row. And this is a 4-year strategic work plan. And so you'll see the exact same thing for 2017, 2018, and 2019. The purpose of the repeat column, that is just additional information. It's not required by the EPA. Really, all the ones that are required by the EPA are columns A through D. E is not required, but it's very, very important, I think, for organization purposes. And then the rest of these are typically optional, more for functionality. But the repeat column allows a user to filter out repeat objectives. So in the case of annually reviewing this, if you want to provide a copy, print out, or show it on a screen, and you don't want to show 4 of these, you just want to show the new activities or just an activity one time, then for each subsequent time you see an activity, so in this case you want to show at least one, you want to show this objective at least one time, but you don't want to show 3 more times over the course of, if you're just focusing on this particular, the climate change program area. Then if you put yes, then you can filter it out, so you only show the ones that do not have a yes on it. So you would put yes for, in this case, you'll see that under 2017 there's likely a, so this is another instance of it right here, and this has a yes, so that you could filter that out, and I'll have more on that later. The source of the objective, so if a particular objective came from a GAP work plan or Clean Water Act work plan or some other type of work plan that there's more information on that objective, you can indicate that here. So in some cases you might put, fiscal year 15-16 GAP work plan. And you may want to be more specific and put what component under that work plan. The status is really kind of an optional thing. It's up to you. When it is under a work plan, I like to put that it's funded. You could also put in progress. You could put pending, but that's just another option to kind of identify what the status of each objective is. There, column K is outputs and deliverables, and that is if the tribe chooses. And this is another optional category, but it can be helpful in developing grant work plans because this information usually needs to be provided in a grant work plan or proposal. So for this line right here, line 33, which is conduct an indoor air quality assessment, prepare a report, and develop an indoor air quality management plan that addresses identified indoor air quality issues. You could put one of the outputs here would be an indoor air quality assessment report and an indoor air quality management plan. So IAQ assessment report, IAQ management plan. So that can be something where if you do that, you are better able to craft work plans later on, or just keep track of what those outputs and deliverables are. The intermediate outcomes column, which is column L here, is if you want to list what the outcomes of that are going to be, and that could be things like improved indoor air quality. It could be reduced incidence of asthma. If you want, this column is just basically an opportunity for somebody to track a particular performance measure for an objective. And again, it's an optional thing, but a lot of times you need to provide this for your grant work plans. Urgency is if you want to list some type of urgency, associate some type of urgency with each particular objective, whether it's none, low, medium, high, or whatever you choose. If you want to associate a specific due date, so if it's going to be needs to be done by the end of the first quarter of the fiscal year, or just December 31st, 2015, you could enter that in here. The next few columns have to do with staffing. So column O is the primary staff responsibility, and these are shorthand. So in this case, I've done some examples of what could be included in here. So let's say your office has an air quality specialist that's responsible for this particular objective, and this one's the indoor air quality assessment and management plan. So you will know, the EPA will know who to go to when there's questions about this particular objective. And so there's a primary staff responsibility, who's the point person on that particular objective, and then after that are the estimated work years for each staff member. So in this example, it's a five member staff. So this environmental department has 5 staff members. ED is short for environmental director. AQS is air quality specialist. This is WQS is water quality specialist. ET is environmental technician, and AA is administrative assistant. So in this case, you could actually put in the estimated work years for each position, and in this particular objective, this is going to be entirely the air quality specialist's responsibility. So when I put in the work years, I actually I put in the number of hours estimated over of how many hours in a full work year. So in this case, it's being estimated that the air quality specialist is going to spend 200 hours over the course of a full work year, which is 2,080 hours, working on this particular objective. So that could be very low, depending on how complex the assessment and work is going to be. But you would put this, and then you could, if there's multiple people working on the same plan, in this case, maybe the director is going to spend 80 hours on this plan as well. So then you enter that information, and in this case, I put it out to 3 decimals, because in some cases, if it's only 8 hours, it would not actually show up. It would just look at like a 0. So you would repeat these columns, and you change these to match your staff, and you can use that for other purposes, staffing estimates, which I'll show in a separate training module. Column U is if you want to work with your GAP grant project officer and determine whether each objective is eligible for GAP funding or not. I think that's a very useful thing to do, to have a conversation, to have them fill out where this may or may not be eligible. Some of them may be pretty obvious that they're eligible. Maybe you're getting funded for it already, or it's very clearly in the GAP guidance as being eligible, but in some cases you may not be clear, and it would be good to get a determination made by your project officer. And so in this case, you'll just put yes or no, and if it's not, column V shows what are some of the other possible funding sources for this particular objective. So you could, if it's not GAP eligible, maybe it's Clean Water Act 106 eligible. In this case, it's an air objective, so maybe it's Clean Air Act 103 or Clean Air Act 105. If you want to estimate the costs for accomplishing this particular objective, and then if the cost was estimated and funding was secured, how much funding was secured, and is there a difference? Where did that funding come from? If you want to keep track of that, any additional notes, and then if there's links or references that you want to include in one particular case, I believe. So some of these I've done before in the tribe's developing an adaptation plan. I've actually done a link to ICLEI's website on how to develop a climate change adaptation plan. So again, within this particular spreadsheet, all 4 tables are required. Within this 3rd table, the objectives table, only A, B, C, and D are specifically, E is probably essential too, are specifically required according to the GAP guidance. The additional ones, they do not have to be filled in. They are just optional things that the tribe may use that will make managing these objectives easier. Okay, so the last two tabs on here, this is pivot table reports. So using the data within this spreadsheet right here, you can run pivot table reports, which is a kind of filtering, like a super powered filtering and calculation table. I will show more about that functionality, a very basic functionality of it in a separate training module. But in this case, you can see that um, the estimated work years for each staff member have been calculated. And this last one is a table where archived goals and objectives can be placed when you're updating the plan and you've accomplished one, or you delete it, you take it out. You can archive it in this last tab so that you can at least keep track of what was accomplished when. And that is the end of this training video.